This is Ninth Lit, and we're reading page 17 about the plowman. I just wanted you to note that the first line tells you almost all you need to know about him, and then it's not as long as the parson. It comes right after the parson. Notice the first line. I'll just read it. There was a plowman with him there, his brother. Now, it sounds like, depending on how you read it, there was a plowman there with him. Who is the him? It could be the plowman, but I think it's the parson. Is that how you read it?
Yes.
So there was a plowman with him, with the parson, and there, his brother. So it sounds like the plowman and the parson are brothers. Now, what's a brother? It's not a dumb question.
Maybe like a fraternity, like how we talked about that, or maybe they're
Okay.
actually biologically related.
That's two right there, two different definitions. I can think of a third.
And Christ.
Right. I love churches that do that, call each other brother. The guys do. I like that. It's a reminder of who we are. So it could be any of those three. It could be all three, I suppose. What does that tell you if he's a brother? What might you expect about the plowman?
That they're close.
That they may be similar, right? Their actions, and you'll see that's to be the case. So let me read it. There was a plowman with him there, his brother. Many a load of dung one time or other he must have carried through the morning dew. He was an honest worker, good and true, living in peace and perfect charity. And, as the gospel bade him, so did he, loving God best with all his heart and mind. And then his neighbor as himself, repined at no misfortune, slacked for no content, for steadily about his work he went, to thrash his corn, to dig or manure or make a ditch. And he would help the poor for love of Christ, and never take a penny if he could help it. And as prompt as any, he paid his tithes in full when they were due, on what he owed, and on his earnings too. He wore a tabard smock and rode a mare. So I think when you see the plowman, you see kind of a carbon copy of the parson. What are some of the things you notice about him? Jack, give me a couple of things you notice about the plowman.
He pays all his debts.
And he pays his tithes. What's a tithe?
With the money he gives to the church, it's like 10%.
Right. Right, very good. So he pays the church, yes.
Oh, it said he loved God with all his heart and his neighbors.
Yeah, isn't that how it work? It kind of works that way. You love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. So he's actually living out the gospel. What else? Yeah.
He's very much like his brother at being compassionate. And
Yeah.
He's like an honest worker, and he does it to gain something, not just like do it.
He doesn't what?
Like he works to, like, whether it's whatever he does, he works to gain
Oh.
something, not just
Doesn't cheat, like the friar who
Yeah.
cheats people, or maybe even the doctor who has a deal going on the side with the pharmacist. This guy, he's honest? Yes.
I was gonna say he's poor. And
Yes.
And in the Beatitudes, it talks about being poor, like, and how you get, it's not just like here on earth materialized things, but also like eternity-wise, like he's going to be filled with riches, just not maybe here on earth.
It's not impossible to be rich and be good. The Bible makes that pretty clear. It's not the wealth that makes you, that corrupts you. It's what did Paul say? It's not money is the root of all evil. It's what? Did you know it doesn't say money is the root of all? What?
Pride.
He does say money, but that's not all he says.
Pride.
It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. It's not money is the root. Money is just a thing. But if we love it, then that becomes the problem. And of course, pride is a problem.
I feel like it would be loyalty, not loyalty to money itself, but loyalty to money and the ways you can make it. Because I feel like love is a feeling, but love like controls. But if it's loyalty, you're more obligated to do something for someone you're loyal to.
Say that last part again.
Okay, so
About
like,
loving somebody you're loyal to.
Okay, so I was saying, like, if you love somebody, I feel like love is a feeling that
Right, and that's love too. You remember we read about 1 Corinthians, love isn't always just a feeling, it's a duty. What do you spend all your time doing? That's probably, you love it, whatever it is. If you think about, what do you think about, what do you think of most of the time? That's probably something you love. The things you do, the things you hang around, people you hang around and all that. So, that's a good point, thank you, yes.
Oh, I'm trying to get my water.
Yeah. All right, so we'll just say he's like a carbon copy, honest, good, he's good and true. He's patient in adversity like the other guy. All right, so let's go on to this is the last group. Who would like to read this? We'll eventually get it. I will start with Catherine. He actually goes through each one of these. He gives us a list. So would you read that little paragraph, Catherine, and then read about the miller? He's quite a character.
There was a reeve, also a miller there, a college municipal from the Inns of Court, a papal pardoner, and in close consort, a church court summoner, riding at a trot, and finally myself. That was a lot.
Okay, this is the last group that he's going to describe. So she's going to read about the miller.
The miller was a chap of 16 stone, and a great stout fellow big with bronze them. He did well out of them, for he could go and win the rim at any wrestling show. Broad, knotty, and short-shouldered, he would boast. He could have any door or hinge and post, or take a run and break it with his head, with his beard like any sow or fox was red, and broad as well, and though it were a spade, and at its very tip his nose displayed. A war on which there stood a tuft of hair, red at the bristles in his old sow's ear. His nostrils were as black as they were wide, and had a sword and buckler at his side. His mighty mouth was like a furnace door, a wrangler and buffoon he had stored. Of tavern stories filthy in the main, his was a master hand at stealing grain. He felt it with his thumb, and thus he knew its quality, and took 3 times his due. A thumb of gold by God, to God an oath. He wore a hood of blue and white coat. He liked to play his bagpipes up and down, and that was how he brought us out of.
Thank you. So there's several things about this guy. Again, in your mind, you should be categories in it. I mean, it's just helpful. By the way, we'll go to the plowman and the parson. They were very much alike, but one was a lay person and one was a clergy. What's the difference between the laity and the clergy?
A lay person is more of a poor person, but the clergy person is a part of the church.
Okay, so let me write those words up here because we'll see them again. Laity and clergy. You could divide this entire group of pilgrims, all 30, into 1 or 2 of those groups. And you're right, clergy means that you work for the church. You're ordained. If you teach Sunday school, you're not clergy. You lead the choir or worship. If you're not ordained as a pastor, you're not clergy. You're just a lay person doing a job. So laity are the people that aren't ordained. You probably have 1 or 2 people in your church that are clergy. Your pastor, and maybe if you have an assistant pastor, maybe a youth pastor. It's a big church. All 3 of those are probably ordained. They're pastors, and they are clergy. So the plowman is laity, and the parson is clergy. So you could divide the entire group into one or other of those. This guy is definitely not clergy. So what else can we say about this guy? Yeah.
It's just interesting, like, he describes, like, the people differently, and so I feel like some, like, things he focuses on more, and I feel like with, the miller, he just really focuses on his, like, terrible appearance, basically.
Yeah, well, yes. How would you describe his appearance?
I mean, he's just very unkempt, like, I guess.
Good, that's a really good word.
He just doesn't really take care of himself, I guess.
Yeah, good. So he's not, he's not a movie star. Doesn't have movie star looks. So he's not that attractive, and he works in a job that you don't have to be. You know, you don't have to dress up to be a miller. But what else is he? Not to judge him too harshly on his looks, but what about his behavior? Yeah.
He was a master at stealing grain.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. He'll still, he sells it and he buys it. And so he tries to cheat the person that he's selling to or the person he's buying from. What else can you say about it? I hope you're making note of these things. Don't waste this opportunity. So what else can you say about the miller? It says he could win the ram at a wrestling show, broad, naughty, short-shouldered. He would boast. He could heave any door off its hinge and post, or take a run and break it with his head.
He's
That-
very strong.
Incredibly strong. He's a large guy. He says he was a chap of 16 stone. That is instead of saying pounds, they had this other in the Middle Ages.
Is that for the miller or the?
This is the miller. So he's strong, he's big, not that attractive looking, he cheats, yes.
What does it mean that he liked to play his bagpipes up and down, and that was how he brought us out of town?
He literally led them out of town playing the bagpipes, like a parade.
Okay.
So that's a good point, yeah.
What does it mean, like, when it says, the miller was a child of 16 stones?
That's his weight.
Okay.
Don't know what the stone, how much that is. Did you notice that he liked to tell dirty stories? He says it right here. He says, a wrangler and a buffoon, he had a store of tavern stories, filthy in the main. So he's the one who tells the miller's tale, obviously.
Like death stories or like
What you,
like dirty stories as in like death and.
no, dirty stories as in sexuality and scatological, you know what I mean by that?
Go ahead, do your thing.
Do you know what scatological means? Look it up.
You got the great journals?
People like to tell, I don't like those kinds of stories, scatological. It's a nice way to say something that's, you don't talk about. All right, so this is this guy. He's a boaster. He's obscene. He's dishonest. He is what he is. All right, so we'll go from that to the manciple. By the way, what do millers do?
They like make the grain.
Yeah, I thought
What do you mean they make it?
They like work it in the mill.
Okay. You know how that works? Ever seen a mill? You probably
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
You have millstones
Yeah.
in the old days.
Yes.
And the grain would be in the middle and the stones would come together and crush it, and they make flour out of that. So it's a physical job. You probably don't know what a manciple is. So I'm going to define that for you. A manciple. Everybody ready? Write it down. A manciple, first of all, he works at a college. And you'll learn about those too. Colleges and universities were beginning to be popular in the Middle Ages. He'll talk about that. So he works at a college as a steward. You know what a steward is?
I'm gonna take a guess and say somebody like who helps people.
Well, no, of course, what he does can help people. He does help, but it's a steward is someone that, in this case, is sort of a business manager, particularly in charge of buying and selling. So, if you have people at a university, you have to buy things. So he will buy things for the university. I don't think they sell anything. Universities don't produce a product except for the students, but he would be a buyer and kind of manage that. That's what a manciple is. The very next guy is called a reeve, R-E-E-V-E. He does the exact same thing for a private estate. So the only difference between the manciple and the reeve, the manciple works for a college, the reeve works for a private estate. All right, so with that in mind, this guy's interesting. We'll go to Anna Grace.
The manciple came from the inner temple. All cadors might follow his example, and buying victuals, he was never rash whether he bought on credit or paid cash. He used to watch the market most precisely, and got in first, and so he did quite nicely. Now isn't it a marvel of God's grace that an illiterate fellow can outpace the wisdom of a man? His masters he had more than 30 then, all versed in the abstrusest legal knowledge, could have produced a dozen from their college, fit to be stewards in land and rents and game, to any peer in England you could name, and show him how to live on what he had, debt-free, unless of course the peer were mad, or be as frugal as he might desire, and make them fit to help about the shire. In any legal case there was to try, and yet this manciple could wipe their eye.
Sorry. So we know what he does. Okay, how good is he at what he does? There are two things about him.
But this is still the manciple?
This is the manciple. There are two things about him you need to remember besides what he does, which we already defined. How good is he? Is he a good manciple or a bad manciple?
Very good.
How good is he?
He's very good, because he watches the market. and
That's
sees what's
that's a good point. That's a good detail.
He was never rash, and
Okay.
he was illiterate, but
Wait a minute. Say that again.
he was illiterate.
What does that mean?
It means like he can't read.
He works at a college and he can't read.
That's a little bit unfortunate.
But keep going. What can we say about it? You said he was a good manciple. Even though he can't read, he's really good with the stock market. What else? How good is he according to Chaucer? Did you notice what it said? He said, let me read this. All versed, the 30 students there, or masters, all versed in the abstrusest, that means hard to understand, legal knowledge, could have produced a dozen from their college, fit to be stewards in land and rents and game, to any peer in England you could name, and show him how to live on what he had debt-free, unless, of course, the peer were mad, or be as frugal as he might desire, and make him fit to help about the shire. In any legal case there were to try, and yet this manciple could wipe their eye. I think that's saying that the best people that graduate from this college, who are quite literate and quite educated, couldn't do their job as well as the manciple does it. Do you know people, I've always asked this every year when we get to this, do you know people who didn't go to college and yet are very
Yes.
successful?
Yes.
Of course you do. Can you name any of them? Do you know who are
My
they?
uncle, plenty of them actually. One of my uncles went to school for something completely different. Now he does a bunch of stuff for stocks in like a tech company and has a house in Panama.
He didn't go to college.
He went to college for one thing, but
But he got, I see what you mean. Yeah.
but he did something like completely out of the field without going to college for
That's
that.
not all that unusual, that people do that, yeah.
We're friends with the owner of 1618. He didn't go to college. He just went to played with food while he has 1618.
What's 15?
16.
What, I don't know either.
It's a
nice
restaurant.
Here in town?
Yeah, it's a.
There's like seafood 1618 Midtown, and then I guess didn't the downtown?
1618. Yeah, I think
But didn't it?
Yeah, I think
I think the downtown closed.
Yeah.
I didn't know either, I didn't know what that was. But anyway, he didn't go to college, yeah.
My uncle is like becoming an engineer and fire foreman.
No college education. Well, you see, what we're saying is that you don't have to go to college to be successful. Nobody in my family until my sisters graduated from college, and then I graduated from college. But none of my father's brothers, nor my father, they were all very successful. That was a different generation. But anyway, I'm just saying this guy didn't go to college, but he was successful. I think it's probably a good thing that you go to college. We're all about education, right? It's what we do. But we're also saying that, you're going to spend a lot of money there. Hope it's a good one. And that doesn't mean that the name is really good. Sometimes those big names don't turn out to be as good as you think they were. So the Lord will guide and direct you to a college, probably. But you can you don't absolutely have to go to college to be successful. Some people they can't be successful without going to college. Anyway, that's this guy. He's really good at what he does, but he can't read or write. All right, let's look at the reeve. He's very similar. Owen, would you read about the reeve? Remember, the reeve does the same job as the manciple, which is he's a steward or a manager, particularly a buyer of things that the estate needs. He runs that kind of the business side of the state, of the estate. Estate is a private house and lands, usually a farm and that sort of thing, so.
The reed was old and choleric, and his beard was shaven closely to his chin. His shorn hair came abruptly to a stop above his ears, and he was docked on top. Just like a priest in front, his legs were lean. Like sticks they were, no cap was to be seen. He kept his bends and garters very trim. No auditor could gain a point on him, and he could judge by watching drought and rain, the yield he might expect from seed and grain. His master's sheep, his animals of him, pigs, horses, dairies, stores, and cattle pens, were fully trusted to his government. He had been under contract to present the account right from the master's earliest years. No one had ever caught him in errors.
Oh, arrears means debt, D-E-B-T, yeah.
No bailiff, serf, or herdsman dared to kick. He knew their dodges, knew every trick. Feared like the plague he was by those beneath. He had lovely dwelling on a heath, shadowed and green by trees above the sword, a better hand at bargains than his lord. He had grown rich and had a store of treasure well tucked away, yet came out of his pleasure. His lord with subtle loans forgives some good, to earn his thanks in even coats and hoods. When young he learnt a useful trade, and still he was a carpenter of first-rate skill. The stallion cob he rode at a slough trot, was dapple gray and bore the name of Scott. He wore an overcoat of bluish shade and rather long, yet a rusty blade. Slung at his side he came, as I heard tell, from Norfolk near a place called Flatwell. His coat was tucked under his belt and displayed. He rode the hindermost of our cavalcade.
All right, this guy's very interesting too. I like these two guys because they're very, have their own unique qualities. What can we say about this reed? Go back and look at it. Tell me some things you know about the reed.
He's very skinny and he's like a very lanky guy.
Very what?
Lanky.
Lanky, but the skinny is correct, which would seem to suggest what?
He's poor because he's not big and can afford food.
But, is that true?
No, but he makes a lot of money. He's probably
Exactly.
one of the best cowboys.
People aren't what they appear to be. A lot. Here's a guy who's thin and skinny, but very well off. Yes, Tate.
Oh wait, I lost my place.
We'll come back to you. Tim.
He was rather old. He was also, it says here, feared like the plague he was by those beneath. So I'm assuming he was either like a horrible person to those beneath, or he's just like really, really good at his job.
Yeah, good point. That word in the first line, he was old and choleric. The word choleric means he was easily irritated. You know, people that are like that, I don't really like to be around them, do you? You know, you never know what you're going to say that might...
He was like Scrooge.
Yeah, you just never know what you're going to say that might set him off, you know, yell at you or something. So that's the way he was. There's another interesting, did you find it?
It said like he could tell by like the rain or the drought how much seed he
So
brings.
he was really good at what he did. Well, this is the detail I thought was interesting. He said he had grown rich and had a store of treasure well tucked away, yet out it came to pleasure his Lord with subtle loans or gifts or goods. Here's the guy that works for the boss, but
He gives him loans.
is giving the boss loans.
Oh.
So that's not that's kind of surprising and interesting. He's so good at what he does that he loans money to the boss. So I like this guy. He's smart. He's feared. He's skinny, which means he should be thin and he should be poor, but he's
I
not.
like
Well,
that he's skinny and feared, not the typical, oh my God, I'm
That's
weird
right.
and you fear me. No.
That's right. Remember the what was his name? Trying to remember this guy's name. Not the doctor, but the Franklin. You remember the Franklin? He was kind of a large guy, and he was wealthy. You know, that's what you expect. This guy is skinny but wealthy. All right, let's go to the next guy, who is the summoner. This story doesn't end on a high note as far as the character of these people. The summoner is quite a character. Campbell's going to read about it. Let me tell you what a summoner does. What is it? What is a summon?
Maybe somebody
Okay,
You're gonna have to.
you're on the right
But
track.
it sounds like a reaper too, like a summoner to maybe have to do.
Do you know what the word summons means? Like if I summon you
Does
to
it
the
have to do with
front office, what
To
does
call
that
or to bring.
Does that have to do with law?
mean? It does. It-
Is this someone who?
Is it like a judge? No.
But what does it mean to summon? Like if you're summoned by the principal to his office, what does that mean you gotta do?
Call or to bring.
So it means to order you to do something. So summoners deliver summonses. A summons, you don't want this to happen, but if you're ever asked to be a witness now they don't come to your house. They just send it in the mail. But if you're asked to be a witness, or if you're charged with a crime, then they would probably come to your house and deliver a summons. That once you get the summons, then the clock starts ticking, and you're obligated. And a lot of people avoid summonses somehow, so they don't have to go to court, but they'll eventually get caught. So to summon, a summoner brings summons. But guys, listen. A summoner works for the church, not the civil courts. Now, I want you to hear it. A summoner works for the courts, the church courts, not the civil courts. So, we said earlier with Thomas Becket, the church had their own court system. And so this is a guy who works for them. So just notice, who's going to read this? Okay.
I have a question real quick.
All right, one more question.
So, when the church system, it had a church, government, and there's the actual government, if you're convicted of a crime in both, what do they do?
Well, I don't know how they separate those things. Of course, we never have had that. We have that separation between the church and the state. So I don't know how that works. That's a good question. Yes.
There was a summoner with us at that inn, his face on fire like a cherubim, for he had carbuncles. His eyes were narrow, he was as hot and lecherous as a sparrow. Black, scabby brows he had, and a thin beard. Children were afraid when he appeared. No quicksilver, lead ointment, tartar creams, no brimstone, no borax, no, so it seems, could make a salve that had the power to bite, clean up or cure his whelks of knobby white, or purge the pimples sitting on his cheeks. Garlic he loved, and onions too, and leeks, and drinking strong red wine till all was hazy. Then he would shout and jabber as if crazy, and wouldn't speak a word except in Latin when he was drunk. Such tags as he would patent. He only had a few, say 2 or 3, that he had mugged up out of some decree. No wonder, for he heard them every day. And as you know, a man can teach a jay to call out Walter better than the Pope. But had you tried to test his wits and grope for more, you'd have found nothing in the bag. Then Quaestor quid juris was his tack. He was a noble varlet and a kind one. You'd meet none better if you went to find one. Why, he'd allow, just for a quart of wine, any good lad to keep a concubine a 12-month and dispense him altogether. And he had finches of his own to feather. And if found some rascal with a maid, he would instruct him not to be afraid, in such a case as the archdeacon's curse, unless the rascal's soul were in his purse. For in his purse the punishment should be. Purse is the good archdeacon's hell, said he. But well I know he lied in what he said. A curse should put a guilty man in dread. For curses kill as shriving brings salvation. We should beware of excommunication. Thus as he pleased, the man could bring duress on any young fellow in the diocese. He knew their secrets, they did what he said. He wore a garland set upon his head, large as the holy bush upon a stake outside an alehouse, and he had cake, a round one, which it was his joke to wield, as if it were intended for a shield.
We gotta go. We get out 5 minutes early on Wednesday. I think it's in Forum, is it? Pretty sure it is. All right, so make sure you're studying the lines and you're reading for next Wednesday.
Could you stop the video?
No, thank you.